What if everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle and Patrick J. Adams on the set of Suits was a lie? What if the charming smiles, the teasing banter, the chemistry that fans adored? What if all of it hid a secret that not even the cameras could capture? Imagine being on set every day, watching the magic unfold, the lights dim, the cameras roll, and yet behind the scenes, a story was playing out that no one dared to tell. A story that, until now, remained buried under layers of professionalism, secrecy, and Hollywood's polished facade. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Aaron Korsh, the creator of the hit show Suits, finally broke his silence. And what he revealed about Patrick J. Adams and Meghan Markle during those years shocked everyone who heard it. According to Korsh, there was more than just on-screen chemistry, more than just friendship or camaraderie. Allegedly, something intimate, something daily, was happening behind closed doors. A revelation like this doesn't just ripple through fan communities. It sends shockwaves across an entire entertainment industry. Because suddenly, everything you thought was innocent, every glance, every laugh, every shared scene, suddenly looks completely different. Let's set the stage. Suits was a juggernaut. It wasn't just a show. It was a phenomenon. Millions tuned in week after week, drawn to the fast-paced legal drama, the witty dialogue, the irresistible charm of its leads. Patrick J. Adams, playing the earnest yet ambitious Mike Ross, won hearts instantly. And Meghan Markle, portraying the sharp, stylish Rachel Zane, was equally captivating. Fans rooted for their romance, their friendship, their triumphs and failures in the fictional Pearson Hardman law firm. But behind the cameras, the story, according to Aaron Korsh, was much more complicated. Aaron Korsh is no stranger to drama, but this confession stunned even those who knew the inner workings of television production. He described moments on set where boundaries were blurred, where professionalism and personal desire collided in ways that made some cast and crew uncomfortable. He spoke of a connection between Patrick and Meghan that went beyond rehearsed lines or scripted romance. Something intimate, something repeated, something that allegedly happened daily. Can you imagine witnessing that day after day without speaking up? What would you do if the people you admired, the stars of a show you loved, were hiding a secret that seemed to bend the very reality of what you thought you knew? Hollywood thrives on secrecy, and yet, sometimes, those secrets leak. Sometimes, they find their way into whispered conversations in hallways, into anecdotes shared between assistants, into the quiet corners where no camera lens dares to peek. What makes this story extraordinary is that the confirmation didn't come from gossip columnists or tabloid speculation. It came from the very person who had the authority, the insider knowledge, the perspective of someone who had seen everything unfold firsthand. Aaron Korsh wasn't just talking about rumors. He was recounting what he had personally witnessed, what he had known to be true. But why does it matter now, years later? Why revisit a story from the set of a show that wrapped up seasons ago? Because Meghan Markle isn't just any former actress. She is, for better or worse, a global figure, a public persona whose life has been dissected, celebrated, and criticized in equal measure. Patrick J. Adams remains a beloved actor, though far less scrutinized than his former co-star. And now, Aaron Korsh's revelation has reignited interest, creating a swirl of speculation and questions that demand answers. For fans of Suits, this changes the lens through which the entire series, and its off-screen dynamics, can be viewed. Think about the moments you remember from the show, the banter, the stolen glances, the quiet scenes where Rachel and Mike shared something private on screen. Now, consider Aaron Korsh's words. These moments were not just scripted interactions. Some of them, allegedly, reflected an off-screen intimacy that viewers never saw. This isn't just a behind-the-scenes anecdote. It's a narrative that forces you to question the line between acting and reality, between friendship and something more. Now, you might be asking yourself, how much of this can be true? Hollywood is no stranger to rumor, exaggeration, and storytelling. Yet the credibility of Korsh, his position as the show's creator, lends weight to these claims. His perspective isn't speculative, it's observational. And while he has been careful not to name every detail or cross boundaries that could lead to legal issues, the implications of what he has admitted are undeniable. Let's pause for a moment and reflect. Imagine being on set, day after day, watching two people who are seemingly perfect for each other on screen, knowing that off screen, the chemistry is even more intense. How would that affect the environment? How would it change the dynamic between cast members, crew, and even the audience? The potential tension, the unspoken understanding, the careful navigation of appearances, these are the things that make Hollywood both fascinating and terrifying. Aaron Korsh also hinted at the pressures of maintaining secrecy. In an industry where image is everything, admitting to such behaviors, or even acknowledging their existence, can have career-altering consequences. Patrick and Meghan were, after all, public figures in the midst of a highly popular series. Any leak could have resulted in scandal, backlash, and a media firestorm. And yet, behind closed doors, according to Korsh, the interactions continued, unnoticed by the public, but keenly observed by those who worked closely with the actors every day. What does this mean for fans, for viewers, for those who believe they were witnessing only the scripted romance? It means that reality and fiction sometimes collide in ways that are shocking, surprising, and uncomfortable. It means that the intimacy, the connection, the closeness that fans adored on screen may have had roots in real life, in moments that were never meant to be seen by anyone outside that set. And now comes the twist, the point that will make even the most ardent fans sit up and take notice. Aaron Korsh didn't just hint at casual closeness or fleeting moments. He described a consistency, a frequency, a pattern that suggested daily interactions of an intimate nature. That's right. According to the creator of the show, Patrick and Meghan weren't just flirting or sharing occasional private moments. They were allegedly getting intimate, regularly, throughout the filming schedule. The idea itself is staggering. It forces you to reconcile what you saw on TV with what may have been happening in reality. Yet, despite the sensational nature of this revelation, Korsh's tone is measured. He doesn't revel in scandal. He reports what he observed. And that distinction is critical, because this story isn't just about gossip or prurient curiosity. It's about understanding the hidden dynamics of fame, attraction, and secrecy in an environment where personal and professional lives collide. So where does this leave us? With questions. Endless, compelling questions that pull you deeper into the narrative. Questions about morality, ambition, human desire, and the cost of secrecy. Questions about how we perceive celebrities and the lives we think we understand. Questions about the boundaries between performance and reality, and how easily those boundaries can blur when the stakes are high and the eyes of millions are watching. And just when you think the story couldn't get more intense, there's one final note of suspense to leave you breathless. According to Aaron Korsh, what occurred behind the scenes not only affected Patrick and Meghan, but also influenced the energy on set, the performances, and even the trajectory of the show itself. The ripple effects of those hidden encounters, he implies, may still be felt today, long after the cameras stopped rolling and the series finale aired. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever walked onto a set and felt like the energy was electric, but not in the way the cameras wanted you to see? That was Suits every single day. The cameras, the crew, the lights, the meticulously crafted scenes, they all told one story. But off-screen, the real story was hidden in the shadows, in whispers behind closed doors, in fleeting glances that lingered just a little too long. And for those who worked there day after day, it was impossible not to notice. The set of Suits wasn't just a workplace. It was a microcosm of Hollywood ambition, charm, and tension. Every actor, every assistant, every production member had to navigate an intricate web of relationships. Friendships were forged, rivalries simmered, and allegiances shifted in subtle ways that outsiders would never understand. And amidst all of that, Patrick J. Adams and Meghan Markle's dynamic didn't just stand out. It commanded attention, even when no one was watching. Aaron Korsh described the atmosphere as one of relentless energy, creativity, and, at times, anxiety. Imagine coordinating dozens of scenes, ensuring every line lands perfectly, every expression hits the emotional mark. Now imagine two of your main actors sharing a connection that felt more real than anything scripted. It was palpable, the kind of connection that makes people lean in, notice the smallest cues, and question what's really happening behind the professional facade. Patrick, as Mike Ross, was the golden boy, charming, intelligent, and quick with a smile that could disarm anyone. Meghan, as Rachel Zane, was equally magnetic, combining wit, elegance, and a sharp mind that made every scene she entered feel alive. On screen, their chemistry was undeniable. Off-screen, according to Korsh, that chemistry went deeper, crossing boundaries that most people on set never expected. Have you ever seen two people who seem inseparable on camera, only to realize they are inseparable off-camera in ways that nobody should be witnessing? That was exactly the tension Korsh hinted at. Crew members noticed subtle behaviors. The way Patrick and Meghan would exchange glances that lasted a beat too long. The private conversations that seemed innocuous but left an echo in the room. Small moments that would have gone unnoticed to anyone who wasn't paying attention. But in Hollywood, paying attention is what keeps careers alive. Aaron Korsh recalled one day when a new assistant walked onto the set, catching Patrick and Meghan in a quiet corner, laughing at something that seemed entirely personal. The assistant froze, unsure of what to do. And for Korsh, it was the first clear sign that the on-screen relationship might be mirroring off-screen realities in ways no one had anticipated. But it wasn't just about flirtation or private jokes. Korsh described moments that suggested an intimacy that went beyond friendly camaraderie. These were interactions that some crew members felt uncomfortable observing but were powerless to stop. Because in Hollywood, as in life, you can't confront power dynamics lightly. Patrick and Meghan were rising stars, adored by fans, respected by peers, and at that point, essential to the show's success. Questioning them could mean jeopardizing your position, or worse, being labeled paranoid or overreacting. And yet, the tension was undeniable. Korsh talked about how even the slightest shift in seating arrangements, in who was in the room for a scene, or who lingered on set after hours, could change the mood entirely. There was an energy that hummed through the production office, through the sound stages, even into the hallways between set locations. Something was happening, something consistent, something that seemed to repeat daily. Think about that for a moment. Daily. Every single day. No breaks, no pauses, no exceptions. And Korsh, the creator, had been watching it unfold, fully aware that this wasn't just a fleeting flirtation, it was a pattern. That consistency is what made the story so explosive. Because while audiences saw episodic romance, what was allegedly happening behind the scenes painted a very different picture, one of habit, desire, and secrecy, all occurring under the watchful eye of everyone who worked there. Korsh also pointed out that the set was a pressure cooker. Long hours, emotional performances, constant public scrutiny, they create an environment ripe for connection. And in that environment, Patrick and Meghan's closeness was almost inevitable. But it wasn't just the intensity of the work that fueled the secret. It was the human need for companionship, validation, and, yes, physical connection. This is where Hollywood often becomes a crucible of contradictions. People are professional, polished, and controlled on camera, yet deeply human and unpredictable off camera. And yet, despite the intensity of these alleged interactions, they managed to maintain an appearance of professionalism in front of others. Korsh described it as a delicate dance, one that required skill, timing, and awareness of who was watching. There was laughter, there was camaraderie, there was the illusion of normalcy. And that's what made it so mesmerizing to those who observed it. The very people you would least expect to be breaking the rules of conduct, doing so in plain sight, hidden in plain view. But what about the other cast members? How did they respond? Korsh mentioned that some were oblivious, some were curious, and some quietly noted the pattern without acting. Hollywood is full of unspoken hierarchies and silent acknowledgments. Confrontation is rare because reputation is everything, and perception can make or break a career. It was a tightrope walk, observing the closeness, wondering about its implications, and yet having to carry on as though nothing unusual was happening. Fans would have been shocked to know that many moments they assumed were scripted actually mirrored what was allegedly happening off camera. Every stolen glance, every whispered word, every subtle touch in the scenes. What if some of those were echoes of reality, moments spilling over from the private lives of the actors into the fictional world? It's a thought that forces you to reconsider everything you watched on screen. And then there were the emotional stakes. Korsh described moments when the intensity of their private interactions influenced their on-screen performances. Some scenes reportedly took on a depth that exceeded the script. The rawness, the tension, the subtle hesitation in delivery, it all carried a flavor of real-life passion. For the crew, it was simultaneously thrilling and unnerving. For Korsh, it was a challenge, balancing the need for narrative coherence with the unpredictability of human desire unfolding in real time. Imagine the ethical tightrope Korsh had to navigate. He was aware of the alleged intimacy but also had responsibilities to protect the actors, to maintain a professional environment, and to ensure the show ran smoothly. Each decision, each observation carried weight. One misstep, one disclosure, and the fallout could have been catastrophic, not just for the actors but for the production as a whole. Yet the story didn't stop there. Korsh's revelations suggested that the intensity of Patrick and Meghan's off-screen interactions wasn't a secret confined to fleeting moments. It was consistent, daily, woven into the fabric of the show's production. And while the crew might have whispered behind closed doors, they largely stayed silent, perhaps out of respect, perhaps out of fear, perhaps because they couldn't fully comprehend what was happening. And this brings us to a question that will linger in your mind. How does a secret like this affect creativity? Does it enhance it, as the heightened emotion fuels better performances? Or does it poison it, introducing tension and distraction that could unravel the delicate balance of production? Korsh hinted that it was a mixture of both. The energy between Patrick and Meghan reportedly added an undeniable spark to certain scenes, but it also created moments of discomfort, moments when the balance between personal and professional blurred, threatening to tip entirely. But here's the twist that makes the story even more compelling. According to Korsh, the daily pattern of intimacy didn't just influence the actors, it influenced the show itself. Scripts were adjusted, scenes were rewritten, subtle changes were made to accommodate the reality unfolding off camera. What fans saw on TV was therefore not just the product of writing and acting talent. It was shaped, in part, by the real-life dynamics of the leads. Can you imagine watching an episode and realizing that some of what you adored wasn't purely fictional? That behind the scenes, the actors' lives bled into the story in ways that no one ever disclosed? And just when you think you've grasped the full picture, there's a moment Korsh described that left him, and the crew, speechless. A day when the boundaries were tested more than ever. A day that exemplified everything that had been quietly simmering beneath the surface. That day, according to Korsh, demonstrated just how blurred the lines between reality and performance had become, and it left an imprint on everyone who witnessed it. But what happened that day? What occurred behind the cameras that changed the dynamic forever, setting the stage for revelations that would eventually reach the public eye? That, according to Korsh, is where the story takes a turn that no one saw coming, and the consequences would ripple far beyond the soundstage of Suits. Have you ever heard a secret that made your jaw drop, your pulse quicken, and your mind refused to believe what you were being told? That's exactly the reaction many people had when Aaron Korsh, the creator of Suits, finally spoke about what really happened on set. For years, the show's stars, Patrick J. Adams and Meghan Markle, were admired, their chemistry celebrated by millions of fans worldwide. On screen, their relationship was artfully scripted, a slow-burning romance that had audiences swooning. Off-screen, according to Korsh, the story was far more combustible. Korsh didn't seek attention when he first considered opening up. He wasn't doing it for clicks or social media virality. He was, as he later admitted, weighed down by a mixture of awe and concern. He'd witnessed patterns, moments, and interactions that no one else had seemed to notice, or if they had, no one dared to speak about them. The weight of keeping such a secret, especially one that involved the very stars who carried his show, was enormous. But over time, Korsh realized that holding the story in could no longer be justified. Fans, the media, and the public deserved to understand the full scope of the dynamics that had quietly shaped Suits. So he spoke. And when Korsh spoke, people listened. His reputation as a creator with both insight and integrity lent credibility to the revelations. He painted a picture of a set that, on the surface, was perfect, energetic, fun, professional. But underneath, there was a rhythm that few could see. The daily closeness between Patrick and Meghan, the private exchanges, the subtle but unmistakable intimacies that were repeated day after day. Imagine being Korsh for a moment. You're directing a hit show, juggling multiple storylines, ensuring actors hit their marks, and suddenly you notice something unusual. A glance lasts too long. A joke lands differently when two people are involved. A break in the scene reveals a private conversation. And it doesn't happen once. It doesn't happen sporadically. It happens consistently, so much so that it starts to influence not only the energy on set, but also the narrative of the show itself. Korsh recalled moments when he had to step back and consider the implications. How do you handle a situation where two of your leads are allegedly engaging in daily intimate behavior? How do you protect the integrity of the production while maintaining professionalism? How do you ensure that other cast and crew members feel safe and respected? Korsh's answers to these questions were cautious, thoughtful, and revealing. He acknowledged that the boundaries were delicate, and any misstep could have unraveled not just his relationships with the actors, but the entire ecosystem of the show. And yet, he also admitted that there was a fascination there, a curiosity that even he could not ignore. Watching Patrick and Meghan interact, seeing the sparks that leapt off-screen, witnessing the energy that seemed to fuel certain scenes, Korsh felt a mixture of admiration and concern. How could two people maintain such professionalism while allegedly engaging in behavior that, if discovered, could destroy careers? How could a secret so explosive remain under wraps for so long? This is where Korsh's confession becomes truly gripping. He described moments of tension, moments of uncertainty, and moments where he, as the creator, had to make split-second decisions. Should he intervene? Should he ignore it? Could he trust that the actors understood the consequences of their alleged actions? And what about the wider cast? The crew? The audience, who would never suspect that behind the polished performances, a real-life drama was unfolding? Korsh revealed that there were subtle signals, small indicators that not everything was as it seemed. For instance, the way Patrick and Meghan would arrive early on set, lingering longer than necessary, their conversations carrying a certain private undertone. Or how certain scenes, particularly those that involve close physical proximity or emotionally charged dialogue, seemed to have an added depth, a spark that Korsh suspected came from real feelings spilling into the script. He also touched on the human element, the undeniable magnetism that drew people together, even in a professional setting. Hollywood, he noted, is filled with people who are talented, ambitious, and driven. When two such individuals are in close quarters day after day, attraction is almost inevitable. But what made Patrick and Meghan's dynamic unique, according to Korsh, was the consistency, the intensity, and the alleged intimacy that went far beyond what most productions ever see. Korsh recounted an incident that had stayed with him for years. It was a day when the tension on set reached a peak. Patrick and Meghan had been rehearsing a particularly charged scene, and Korsh noticed a pattern. Their off-screen behavior seemed to mirror their on-screen interaction. After the scene wrapped, they retreated to a corner of the set, away from prying eyes, laughing, talking, and, according to Korsh, engaging in behavior that was decidedly more personal than professional. An assistant happened to glance in their direction and froze, unsure what to make of the situation. It was a snapshot of what Korsh described as the daily dynamic, a mix of secrecy, excitement, and intensity that the world would never see. What made Korsh's account especially compelling was his honesty about his own reactions. He admitted to being conflicted, fascinated, and cautious all at once. He understood the potential ramifications of these behaviors, not only for the actors involved, but for the show itself. He also understood that revealing too much could lead to scandal, lawsuits, or media frenzy. And yet, he felt compelled to share enough to give the world a glimpse into what life was really like behind the cameras. Korsh emphasized that his account was grounded in observation, not speculation. He wasn't fabricating stories for drama. He wasn't embellishing for clicks. What he described was based on real, repeated interactions that he personally witnessed. That credibility is what makes the revelation so hard to ignore. When the creator of a beloved show admits that two of the stars allegedly engaged in daily intimate behavior, the implications ripple outward, through fan communities, through media coverage, through the collective perception of a show that millions thought they understood. And it wasn't just about Patrick and Meghan. Korsh highlighted the effect their dynamic had on the entire cast and crew. People whispered in hallways. Cast members exchanged knowing glances. Assistants tried to navigate the tension without drawing attention to themselves. Every production decision, every scene adjustment, every scheduling choice suddenly carried a hidden layer of complexity. Korsh described it as a delicate ecosystem, one where the actions of two people could subtly influence the energy of dozens, if not hundreds, of others. But here's the most shocking aspect. According to Korsh, what Patrick and Meghan allegedly shared wasn't limited to fleeting encounters. It was daily, repetitive, a pattern that suggested a level of intimacy that few could believe. And because it was consistent, because it occurred in the proximity of work, because it carried emotional and physical undertones, the consequences, should it have become public, would have been catastrophic. Korsh also hinted at moments when the off-screen dynamic enhanced the on-screen performances. Certain scenes, particularly those involving emotional vulnerability or romantic tension, reportedly had an authenticity that transcended the script. Viewers, Korsh noted, might have assumed it was just good acting. But according to him, the line between acting and reality was blurred, creating a powerful, undeniable chemistry that fueled the narrative of Suits. And yet, the story isn't just about allure or performance. It's about the human side of secrecy, desire, and professional boundaries. Korsh's confession shines a light on how individuals navigate the collision of personal feelings with public responsibilities. How do you manage attraction while maintaining professionalism? How do you handle repeated intimate interactions without jeopardizing careers? How do you keep a secret that could change the perception of everyone involved? Finally, Korsh revealed the moment that made him realize the gravity of what was happening. It wasn't a single incident. It was a culmination of weeks, months, and years of subtle interactions, glances, and behaviors that collectively painted a picture of a daily dynamic between Patrick and Meghan that was intimate, intense, and undeniably personal. That realization was both thrilling and frightening, for Korsh and for anyone who worked closely with them. And just when you think you understand the scope of Korsh's revelation, there's the cliffhanger that sets the stage for the next chapter. What happened when this pattern was almost exposed? What occurred when someone new to the set noticed the interactions and began asking questions? Korsh's account suggests that there was a day when secrecy teetered on the edge, a day when everything nearly came crashing down, and the consequences would have been unimaginable. What if everything you thought was acting was real? That's the question Aaron Korsh forced himself to confront every single day on the set of Suits. Fans had long adored the relationship between Patrick J. Adams and Meghan Markle. The way Mike and Rachel's story unfolded week after week felt authentic, heartfelt, and believable. But what if some of that authenticity wasn't acting at all? What if the chemistry that made millions of viewers swoon on screen had its roots in moments that no audience was meant to see? Korsh described it as a strange duality, one that left him both fascinated and uneasy. On one hand, the on-screen dynamic was electric, drawing in audiences, generating buzz, and making the show a cultural phenomenon. On the other hand, what he witnessed off-screen sometimes mirrored the intimacy, tension, and vulnerability portrayed in the script, but in ways that went far beyond professional boundaries. Imagine watching your actors perform a love scene, and then realizing that the sparks didn't stop when the cameras were off. The on-screen performances were polished, carefully crafted, and rehearsed to perfection. But according to Korsh, there were moments when Patrick and Meghan brought something unspoken, something unscripted, into their performances. A lingering look here, a subtle touch there, a hesitation or sigh that wasn't written in the script. These nuances, Korsh noted, weren't accidental. They were echoes of a real-life connection unfolding behind the scenes. The result was a synergy so intense that the line between fiction and reality often blurred for everyone present. And yet, the actors were careful. Korsh explained that while the chemistry was undeniable, Patrick and Meghan maintained a facade of professionalism when others were watching. The intimacy he observed happened mostly in private spaces, between takes, in hallways, or in moments when the crew's attention was elsewhere. This secrecy added a layer of tension to the set, creating an atmosphere of both anticipation and unease. Everyone knew something was happening, but few dared to speak about it openly. It wasn't just about physical closeness, either. Korsh emphasized that much of what he observed was emotional. There were conversations filled with laughter, shared secrets, and moments of genuine vulnerability. The kind of emotional intimacy that, when paired with physical attraction, can ignite an almost palpable connection. And the fact that it reportedly occurred on a daily basis made it all the more extraordinary and complicated. Have you ever witnessed two people so in sync that it's impossible to distinguish where one ends and the other begins? Korsh used this analogy to describe Patrick and Meghan's dynamic. Their energy, he said, flowed into every scene, every rehearsal, and even the way they interacted with others on set. It was magnetic, drawing attention even from those who weren't looking. And while fans saw only the polished final product, Korsh was there to observe the moments in between, the laughter, the private jokes, the stolen glances that seemed to linger just a second too long. But there was a tension underlying these interactions. Korsh described moments of contradiction, where the actors' on-screen roles required one thing, while their off-screen behavior suggested something entirely different. Mike Ross was supposed to be earnest, principled, and occasionally awkward in his romance with Rachel. Yet Patrick, Korsh noted, carried himself with a confidence and charm off-screen that mirrored his character's cleverness, but with added layers of personal intimacy directed toward Meghan. The interplay between character and reality created a complex web that Korsh struggled to manage. Other cast members reportedly noticed it too. Some were amused, some curious, and some uneasy. Korsh recounted how certain extras or supporting actors would pause during scenes, sensing an intensity that didn't align with the script. Even crew members, whose jobs were to focus on lighting, camera angles, and continuity, occasionally caught glimpses of something that made them question whether what they were seeing was truly part of the show or a reflection of a private reality. And what about the fans? They were none the wiser, enthralled by the story unfolding on screen. Episodes featuring Mike and Rachel were dissected, analyzed, and shared across forums and social media. Fans debated the characters' chemistry, theorized about their relationship, and celebrated the authenticity of the performances. But what they couldn't see, what they couldn't even imagine, was that some of that authenticity might have been fueled by the actors' private, daily interactions, a secret layer that lent an unspoken realism to every scene. Korsh also pointed out moments when this duality created complications. There were times when Patrick and Meghan's real-life energy conflicted with the demands of the script. A line might be delivered differently, a pause extended, or a gesture linger just a second too long. Korsh would have to step in, carefully navigating the tension between allowing authentic emotion to enhance the scene and maintaining the structure and intent of the script. It was a balancing act, one that required sensitivity, awareness, and constant attention. And the emotional stakes were high. Korsh described the subtle stressors, jealousy, competition, and the fear that something private might become public. Patrick and Meghan reportedly managed this delicate situation with a mixture of charm and discretion, but the tension was palpable. Even minor incidents, an overheard conversation, a lingering glance, a private joke, could create ripples across the cast and crew, raising questions, curiosity, and sometimes discomfort. Here's the kicker. The intensity wasn't occasional. Korsh confirmed that these moments were frequent, forming a daily rhythm. Day after day, the same patterns played out in ways that blurred the line between fiction and reality. And while the actors maintained a professional exterior, the undercurrent of intimacy, emotional and possibly physical, was something Korsh could not ignore. It shaped the energy of the set, the performances, and the very tone of the show. And just when you think the story is confined to the boundaries of the actors' off-screen lives, Korsh revealed something even more striking. The on-screen and off-screen realities were so intertwined that sometimes it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. A moment that seemed scripted might have been a reflection of a private exchange moments earlier. A performance that appeared rehearsed might have been fueled by genuine emotion. This fusion of reality and fiction created scenes so compelling, so authentic, that audiences were captivated without ever realizing the hidden truths behind them. But what about the ethical implications? Korsh admitted he often wrestled with this question. Is it exploitation if the actors are consenting adults? Is it professional misconduct if boundaries are unclear? How does one navigate a situation where daily interactions carry an intensity that no observer should be expected to manage? These questions haunted Korsh, shaping his decisions on set and influencing the way he approached directing certain scenes. And then came the moment that would test the limits of secrecy and discretion. It wasn't a single incident. It was a sequence of interactions that exposed just how entangled on-screen performance and off-screen reality had become. Patrick and Meghan were rehearsing a pivotal scene, one that required emotional vulnerability, and Korsh noticed a subtle shift. Their energy, previously contained, now seemed to spill over, creating a tension so intense that it was almost visible. The crew sensed it. The other actors sensed it. And for Korsh, it was a moment of both exhilaration and apprehension. How much of this could he allow to play out? How far could this intimacy influence the scene before it became a liability? And just as he was grappling with these questions, a new element entered the picture. Someone who hadn't been part of the daily rhythm of the set. Someone whose observations could disrupt the delicate equilibrium. A fresh perspective, an untrained eye, and suddenly the veil of secrecy was at risk. The interactions that had been hidden in plain sight were now vulnerable to discovery. But what happened when this new presence started noticing the patterns? How did Patrick and Meghan respond? And what did Korsh do to manage the tension before the entire situation spiraled out of control? That's the question that sets the stage for a story that becomes even more gripping in the next chapter. A story of secrets, confrontation, and the daily rhythm of intimacy that no one outside the set could possibly imagine. Daily. That was the word Aaron Korsh used that made even him pause. Daily. Not once in a while. Not sporadically. Not just when the cameras were rolling. Daily. According to Korsh, Patrick J. Adams and Meghan Markle allegedly engaged in a rhythm of intimacy that unfolded day after day on the set of Suits. And for those who worked around them, it wasn't subtle. It was a pulse, a constant undercurrent of tension and attraction that could be felt, even if not always seen. Imagine arriving on set every morning and knowing, deep down, that two of the lead actors were sharing moments that were not part of the script. How would that affect the energy of the entire environment? How would it shape performances, affect morale, or influence the interactions of everyone else on set? Korsh described it as a living, breathing secret, a pattern that had to be managed carefully, navigated with discretion, and observed without letting it derail the professionalism of a multi-million-dollar production. According to Korsh, the routine began almost predictably. Early arrivals, private conversations in corners of the set, the way they lingered a little longer after rehearsals ended. Sometimes, there would be laughter, quiet whispers, or subtle touches that seemed innocent to the untrained eye, but spoke volumes to those who were paying attention. And because it happened daily, the interactions built on each other, creating a rhythm, a pattern, and a tension that became part of the set's very fabric. It wasn't only about what happened in isolation. The routine of these encounters affected the entire flow of the day. Scene rehearsals sometimes took longer than necessary, not because of technical issues, but because the actors' energy had shifted in a way that brought an intensity to their performances. Korsh admitted that he sometimes watched in awe, both impressed by the authenticity it brought to the show and concerned about the ethical implications. Every interaction off-camera had a ripple effect, influencing lines, gestures, and emotions on-screen in ways that were subtle, yet undeniable. And what about boundaries? That's where the story becomes more complex. Korsh emphasized that Patrick and Meghan were careful to maintain appearances. Publicly, they were professional, polite, and in control. Privately, however, they allegedly navigated a delicate dance of secrecy. They had to manage who could observe them, when interactions could occur, and how to keep the routine invisible to others. That level of planning and discretion, Korsh said, required awareness, subtlety, and a keen sense of timing. One misstep, one moment of exposure, and the consequences could have been catastrophic for both actors and for the show. Korsh also noted the emotional dimension. Daily intimacy, particularly in an environment as intense as a high-profile TV set, creates emotional entanglement. What begins as physical attraction can evolve into deeper emotional connection, or at the very least, heightened tension. And when that emotional energy is combined with the pressure of deadlines, public scrutiny, and high expectations, it creates a combustible mixture that can influence everything from performances to morale to personal well-being. And here's the paradox that Korsh wrestled with. The daily routine of secret encounters enhanced the authenticity of the show while simultaneously threatening to undermine the professionalism of the production. Scenes that were meant to be scripted became infused with real emotion. The chemistry that fans adored was, according to Korsh, fueled not just by acting talent, but by genuine off-screen connection. Yet that same connection created moments of tension, jealousy, and uncertainty that could have jeopardized relationships, reputations, and even the show itself. Korsh recounted a specific incident to illustrate this. It was a typical day on set. Patrick and Meghan arrived early, exchanging casual greetings with the crew, but lingering near each other longer than expected. As the cameras rolled, their performance carried an extra spark, a subtle glance, a soft laugh, a pause that wasn't in the script. After the scene, they slipped away to a private corner, engaging in a brief, intimate exchange. An assistant, who had just joined the set, noticed the behavior and froze, unsure whether to mention it or look away. That brief moment encapsulated the entire dynamic of the alleged routine, consistent, discreet, and yet impossible to ignore if you were paying attention. The daily encounters, Korsh said, also shaped relationships beyond the lead actors. Supporting cast members, extras, and crew were subtly influenced by the energy emanating from Patrick and Meghan. Some found it exciting, some found it uncomfortable, and some simply tried to ignore it. The atmosphere became a mix of fascination, tension, and unspoken awareness. Everyone knew something was happening, yet no one wanted to confront it directly. And the interactions weren't limited to the set itself. Korsh mentioned moments in which the dynamic spilled into off-hours events, rehearsals, and social gatherings. The daily pattern of connection followed a rhythm that seemed inescapable, seeping into every layer of production. It created a web that was carefully managed but ever-present, a private reality that existed alongside the public performance of a hit television series. Korsh reflected on the psychological impact as well. Maintaining a secret of this magnitude, day after day, creates stress. It requires constant attention, self-control, and an awareness of timing and context. Patrick and Meghan allegedly navigated this tightrope with skill, but the pressure, Korsh noted, was undeniable. Even the smallest slip, a glance too long, a gesture too intimate, could disrupt the delicate balance. And then there were the moments that tested the secrecy. Korsh spoke about days when unexpected visitors arrived on set. New crew members, interns, or guest actors who weren't accustomed to the environment. These moments were tense. Patrick and Meghan had to adjust, recalibrate, and ensure that their routine remained invisible. Korsh described these scenarios as high-stakes exercises in discretion, each requiring precise timing and subtlety. The daily routine wasn't just a pattern. It was a performance layered on top of another performance, demanding constant vigilance. The most striking element, according to Korsh, was the consistency. This wasn't a one-time incident or a fleeting moment of attraction. It was a daily, repeated pattern, one that seemed almost ritualistic in its regularity. Each encounter built upon the previous one, creating a sense of intimacy and connection that deepened over time. For those observing, it was clear that this was more than casual flirtation. It was a sustained, deliberate interaction that had become part of the rhythm of life on set. And yet, Korsh emphasized, it was never coercive or harmful. By his account, both Patrick and Meghan were willing participants, navigating the rhythm with awareness and consent. The tension, the secrecy, and the intimacy were all part of a delicate balance, one that required careful management and a keen understanding of human behavior. But just when the routine seemed manageable, a disruption occurred. Korsh hinted at a day when an unexpected observer noticed the pattern and questioned it. The secrecy was at risk. The careful balance that had been maintained for months or years was suddenly threatened. And what happened next, Korsh suggested, could have exposed the routine to the world, unraveling the delicate ecosystem that had allowed the daily encounters to continue unnoticed. What happened when the routine was almost exposed? Who noticed? How did Patrick and Meghan respond? And how did Korsh manage the tension to ensure the show continued without scandal? That's the question that sets up the next chapter, where the collision of observation, curiosity, and secrecy creates a scenario so tense it could have changed everything on set and beyond. Have you ever seen something so unexpected, so private, so explosive that you weren't sure whether to react or look away? That's exactly what some of the crew members and extras on Suits reportedly experienced when they began noticing the patterns between Patrick J. Adams and Meghan Markle. According to Aaron Korsh, there were moments when the off-screen behavior was so intimate, so consistent, that witnesses couldn't help but feel a mixture of shock, curiosity, and disbelief. These weren't fleeting glances or casual jokes. Korsh described interactions that carried emotional depth, private energy, and at times, physical undertones. Witnesses, the assistants, the camera crew, the supporting cast, noticed behaviors that seemed unusual, even in an environment as high-pressure and chaotic as a television set. People would pause, hesitate, and sometimes whisper to each other in corners. What they were seeing didn't align with the professionalism they were trained to expect. And yet, it was happening right in front of them. One example Korsh recalled involved a lighting technician who had just joined the production. On his first day, he noticed Patrick and Meghan lingering after a scene, speaking quietly, laughing, and occasionally leaning in toward each other. To someone unfamiliar with the nuances of Hollywood social behavior, it might have seemed harmless, but the energy in the room told a different story. Korsh described the technician's reaction as frozen amazement, unsure whether he should report it, ignore it, or simply step away. And that hesitation, Korsh noted, was common among witnesses. No one wanted to make waves, yet no one could deny the intensity of what they were seeing. Other witnesses included veteran crew members who had seen countless actors navigate on-set relationships. Even they were taken aback. Korsh emphasized that the daily nature of Patrick and Meghan's interactions made them different from standard Hollywood flings. There was consistency, intention, and emotional depth that couldn't be easily dismissed. It was as if the private connection between the two actors was an additional character on the set, one that influenced everything from mood to performance to social dynamics. And it wasn't always subtle. Korsh recounted moments when the pair's off-screen intimacy spilled into spaces where others could see. A shared laugh, a hand brushing briefly against another, a look that lingered just a second too long. All of these details caught the attention of witnesses. People felt caught between fascination and discomfort, unsure how to interpret what they were seeing. Was it harmless? Was it serious? Or was it something more, something that could potentially disrupt the professional environment if it became public knowledge? Some witnesses, Korsh said, attempted to rationalize the behavior. They attributed it to chemistry needed for the show, or to the natural closeness of actors who spend long hours together. Others, however, couldn't shake the feeling that what they were witnessing was extraordinary. It was the kind of thing that stayed with you, that you discussed quietly in break rooms, in hallways, or after work. It became a shared secret, an unspoken understanding among those who observed it, an acknowledgement that something was happening beyond the script, beyond the cameras, and beyond the knowledge of the public. And while the witnesses remained largely silent, Korsh noted that the intensity of their observations sometimes created tension. Some felt complicit simply by watching. Others worried about professional repercussions if they mentioned anything. Hollywood is a world where discretion is paramount, where gossip can destroy reputations, and where curiosity is often tempered by fear. Witnesses had to balance their own reactions with the knowledge that their role was to maintain the professionalism of the production, even as they watched a private drama unfold in plain sight. Korsh also highlighted moments when witnesses almost exposed the situation. A new assistant might accidentally comment on the closeness they observed. A supporting actor might misinterpret a private exchange. And in those moments, the tension on set spiked. Patrick and Meghan were careful, Korsh said, but the sheer intensity of their daily connection meant that moments of near exposure were inevitable. And each time it happened, the ripple effect was significant. Witnesses were left stunned, uncertain, and acutely aware that they had just glimpsed something extraordinary. But it wasn't just about curiosity. Korsh emphasized that the witnesses also felt a kind of awe. Watching two people allegedly maintain daily intimacy while performing at the highest level of their craft was mesmerizing. It was a masterclass in secrecy, charm, and balance. And for some, it was a reminder of the extraordinary human capacity for connection, even in highly controlled, high-stakes environments. And yet, as fascinating as the witnesses found it, the dynamic was fragile. Korsh recounted a day when a particularly observant crew member noticed a pattern that had previously gone unrecognized. The daily interactions weren't random. They followed a rhythm, a predictable pattern that could potentially expose the behavior if someone was paying close enough attention. The knowledge that witnesses could piece together the routine added another layer of tension to the set, a subtle reminder that even the most carefully maintained secrets carry risk. And then came the day that Korsh described as the tipping point. It wasn't a single incident. It was a series of small observations by multiple witnesses that could have converged into exposure. A new camera assistant saw an exchange that didn't fit the usual rehearsal pattern. An actor from a supporting role noticed a private glance that lasted longer than usual. And a crew member overheard a quiet joke that seemed loaded with subtext. Each observation alone might have been dismissed. But together, they formed a pattern that, if recognized publicly, could unravel the carefully maintained secrecy. Korsh admitted that he felt the pressure. The tension among witnesses, the possibility of exposure, and the daily rhythm of intimacy between Patrick and Meghan created a situation that was both exhilarating and precarious. How do you manage something that is happening consistently, in plain sight, yet remains hidden from the world? How do you balance observation, discretion, and the need to maintain the show's integrity? Korsh's reflections reveal the psychological tightrope that existed every day on set. But perhaps the most compelling part of Korsh's account is the way witnesses reacted emotionally. Some were shocked. Some were fascinated. Some felt a mix of admiration and discomfort. The daily routine of encounters, the consistency of intimacy, and the subtlety of secrecy created an atmosphere of tension that lingered long after the scenes wrapped. Witnesses were left with questions. Were the actors in love? Were they exploiting the dynamic? Or was it something else entirely, something that only those who worked closely with them could understand? And just when you think the tension couldn't be higher, Korsh hinted at a moment when one witness almost broke the unspoken code. A near exposure, a slip of the tongue, a comment almost shared with someone who didn't know the rules. This single moment threatened to reveal everything, to bring the private world of Patrick and Meghan into the public eye. What happened next? How did they respond? And how did Korsh navigate the situation to maintain secrecy while keeping the show running smoothly? The answers to these questions set the stage for a revelation that would alter the dynamics of the set forever and lead directly into the next chapter, where boundaries are tested, secrets are almost exposed, and the fine line between personal intimacy and professional responsibility is pushed to the breaking point. Have you ever wondered what it takes to maintain the perfect image when everyone is watching, but your reality is completely different? That's the challenge Patrick J. Adams and Meghan Markle allegedly faced every single day on the set of Suits. On screen, they were the epitome of charm, professionalism, and romantic tension. Off-screen, according to Aaron Korsh, they navigated a private world of intimacy, connection, and behaviors that no fan, no journalist, and no casual observer could have predicted. The contrast between public perception and private reality was astonishing. Korsh emphasized that maintaining these dual personas required incredible skill. Patrick and Meghan had to present themselves as polished, controlled, and consistent in front of cameras, co-stars, and crew. Every smile, every laugh, every gesture had to appear natural, effortless, and aligned with their characters. But behind closed doors, or in moments when only select crew members were present, their interactions allegedly carried a depth and intensity that went far beyond the script. Imagine the cognitive load, the mental gymnastics required to sustain that duality day after day. It's a level of self-awareness few could manage without slipping. The public persona, Korsh explained, was carefully curated. Interviews, photos, fan interactions, and media appearances all reinforced the image of Patrick and Meghan as professional, friendly, and approachable. Their chemistry on-screen was mirrored by charisma off-screen, creating the illusion of natural compatibility. But the private persona, the one hidden from fans and most of the crew, was more complex, more intimate, and, at times, more provocative. Korsh described it as a private language, an energy exchange that existed alongside their public image, influencing performances and relationships in ways that were invisible to the average observer. Korsh recounted an instance during a press junket. Patrick and Meghan were being interviewed, smiling for cameras, laughing at rehearsed jokes, and presenting the perfect image of on-screen romance. To fans and journalists, it was effortless. But Korsh knew what had happened just hours earlier on set. The private interactions, the subtle intimacies, the daily routine of connection, they hadn't disappeared. The energy carried over into public appearances, adding authenticity to performances while simultaneously creating a hidden tension that few could detect. And that tension wasn't limited to the actors themselves. Korsh described the effect on the production team. Crew members were constantly balancing their awareness of the private reality with the demands of the public-facing persona. Directors, assistants, and supporting cast had to navigate interactions carefully, ensuring that they didn't disrupt the delicate equilibrium between the public and private worlds. Even minor deviations, an unintended glance, a misinterpreted comment, could ripple through the set, creating discomfort or confusion. Korsh also highlighted the contradictions inherent in these dual lives. The public persona demanded composure, professionalism, and charm, while the private persona allowed for spontaneity, emotional connection, and physical intimacy. Balancing these contradictory demands was no small feat. It required awareness, control, and discretion. It required an understanding of timing, audience, and environment. And, according to Korsh, it demanded an ability to perform intimacy convincingly without letting it become indiscreet or disruptive. The psychological impact of this duality was significant. Korsh observed moments when the actors' private energy subtly influenced their public behavior. There were glances that lasted longer than necessary, smiles that hinted at inside jokes, and pauses in dialogue that seemed loaded with unspoken meaning. Crew members noticed, fans didn't, and the actors managed it all with a precision that Korsh described as remarkable. It was like watching a high-wire act without a safety net, an act that required skill, awareness, and constant adjustment. And yet, the public persona was vital. Patrick and Meghan's careers depended on perception. Fans, producers, and the media had to believe in the narrative of professionalism and chemistry. Any hint that off-screen behavior was influencing the on-screen story inappropriately could have been catastrophic. Korsh explained that the tension between authenticity and secrecy added a layer of complexity to every scene, every interaction, and every decision on set. It was a delicate dance, performed flawlessly most of the time, but always on the edge of exposure. Korsh also recounted moments of irony and contradiction. On one hand, the public adored the apparent romance and chemistry between Mike and Rachel. On the other hand, the reality of daily intimate encounters meant that the energy driving those performances was not entirely fictional. It was both exhilarating and dangerous, a secret that could have reshaped public perception if revealed prematurely. The paradox of creating a believable, romantic, and emotionally charged narrative while maintaining private secrecy is something few outsiders can fully appreciate. Witnesses, according to Korsh, occasionally struggled with the duality. They could see the on-screen performance and appreciate the public persona while simultaneously observing private interactions that contradicted the scripted story. That contradiction created tension, curiosity, and moral dilemmas. Should they intervene? Should they comment? Should they ignore it? Hollywood etiquette and professional codes often force silence, even when observation created unease. And it wasn't just a mental or emotional challenge. Korsh described physical cues that highlighted the dual personas. The way Patrick and Meghan moved, the timing of gestures, the subtle synchronization of laughter and facial expressions. It was as if their private intimacy spilled into public spaces in microbursts that few could detect consciously, but everyone could feel subconsciously. That energy created scenes that were compelling, authentic, and unforgettable, but also impossible to fully separate from the alleged private behavior that fueled it. Korsh also explained how this duality played out during filming breaks. Off-camera, Patrick and Meghan would reportedly retreat to corners or quieter areas, engaging in exchanges that seemed personal, intimate, and sometimes intense. Yet when the cameras rolled again, they were effortlessly professional. The transition between private intimacy and public performance was seamless, a testament, Korsh said, to their awareness, skill, and perhaps a desire to maintain control over their public image. And while Korsh never accused anyone of wrongdoing, he noted that the duality created ethical complexities. Maintaining secrecy while engaging in intimate behavior in a professional environment is fraught with risk. Crew members had to navigate these situations delicately, knowing that exposure could have career-altering consequences. The dual personas, public and private, were not just about performance. They were about managing perception, protecting reputations, and maintaining control in an environment where everything is scrutinized. Finally,